Hey folks, it's Thomas from Ramblings by Thomas, or at my domain at thomasmiller.me. I have taken a few months off from the blog to tend to some personal matters. I had a son born back in February, John David Miller. He happens to share the same birth date as his older brother, but we didn't obviously plan the delivery that way. It was an overall normal pregnancy and a normal delivery, but when he was born, he had a few features that the doctors found concerning. He had bent fingers, which is called a clinodactyl. It's something you'll have to Google. I'll try to put a link at the bottom of this video. And he had a high arch in his palate. It was connected. If it wasn't connected, he would have had a cleft palate. But it was fully connected, just with a high arch. And usually when they see those features, it can indicate some maybe genetic issues, some concerns. But he passed all the preliminary testing, looking at chromosome counts, which could tell you if they have Down syndrome and other items, other syndromes, other issues. But those came back negative. He had a rather intense genetics test ran that didn't show anything obvious that he could have. And then one other feature he did have is his chin is recessed. It's back just a little bit. Not too much, but it's back a little bit. And so to see all that together just, had them concerned. It didn't mean that he had definite issues. It just meant there was some concern. Well, the issue we had when he first was born was he wasn't gaining weight quick enough, but we got that under control about after a week and a half, 2 weeks. So he was released to us and did well for the first month and a half. Was gaining steadily, and then he stopped. And that concerned his pediatrician, which concerned us. They threw out words like feeding tube and hospitalization. So we worked harder and tried to spend longer getting him to eat, but it just wasn't working. So on May 2nd, he was admitted to McLean Children's in Temple, Texas. Originally, he was going to be admitted, a feeding tube was going to be inserted, and he was going to be fed and gain weight, and everything was going to be fine. Unfortunately, that's not how it went. Instead, he either maintained his current weight or he was dropping very slightly. They did notice that his larynx was collapsing when he would breathe in, so he was having to use his chest muscles. That was concerning them, so they said they needed to correct it. So he underwent larynx surgery, and they removed some tissue, and that seemed to have cleared up the breathing. But he was still having the eating issues, so they had to wait a week after the larynx surgery to place a feeding tube in his stomach. This is where they go in through the belly button and done laparoscopically. It sounds more painful than the process actually is. Well, he had the feeding tube placed, but they had to wait about a day or so before they could use it. And so during all this time, his weight was just dropping. Not severely, but significantly where we were concerned as parents. At one point, he had dropped lower than what he was when he was admitted, and that makes you nervous. Well, he was in the hospital, went from the 2nd all the way up until yesterday. He was released. One thing you don't think about is your spouse. In this case, my wife was with him the entire time. Meanwhile, I was able to get out and go to work, and I spent a few nights at the hospital, but for the most part, I could leave when I needed to. Well, she couldn't, and I think we take things like our spouses for granted. They're there all the time. We get into our routines, and we don't like change. Well, her mother had came down for a few days, but she ended up having to go back to work during the middle of this, and so for probably the last week, I've had to take care of my two other sons. And when I say had, I don't mean make it sound like a chore, but I was taken out of my comfort zone. I was having to do more things than I'm used to, and I know there are single parents out there, and they have a much harder life than I did. I can't complain for my week and a half to a week of having to have taken care of my children all by myself, but it does make you stop and think. For me, the biggest concern was if something happened to me, that was all they had for that time period. And that was kind of where I got nervous. But, to wrap this up, don't take things for granted. We had wonderful support from our church. We had wonderful support from my coworkers who helped me greatly, mostly in understanding if I wasn't always at work and if I was out or preoccupied with other issues. I don't wish problems upon any parents at all, and it's unfortunate that we don't really reflect on what we have until we have a problem in our life. But to wrap this up, John is currently healthy. He started gaining weight towards the end of his stay at the hospital, enough for him to go home. It's still going to be a battle for the next few months, for a few years, because we still don't know what he may have. They've tossed out possibility of cerebral palsy. He may have it, he may not. He does smile a lot, and he can take food by the bottle. He just is a little slow at eating, little underdeveloped in his muscle tone. Well, that's it. I'll try to provide some more updates, but this is kind of a personal reflection of what was going on, and that is it. Talk to you later.